Today, Apple announced that their long-term, almost 3 decades designer, Jony Ive, will be leaving the company to start his own company, Love From, and there's so much to talk about with where Apple's going in this new direction. Clearly, it means back to skeuomorphism, right? That's clearly what this means. No, I feel like so many people aren't actually reading the newsroom post that Apple made. So today we're talking about what it means that Jony Ive is, yes, leaving Apple, but how exactly does that affect the future of Apple's design? Let's begin. So first off, I think it's worth mentioning that while Jony Ive is leaving Apple as a company and starting his own design project, Apple is his first client, okay? He's still designing things for Apple, and even in the statement, lots of quotes from Tim Cook say he's very much looking forward to working with him in the future. They consider this a new evolution of their business relationship. It is by no means ending, which is why I find it hilarious that so many people are jumping to the conclusions that, oh, he's gone, he's not going to be affecting any of Apple's products in the future. Clearly he is. He's been designing Apple's products and more recently their software since before I was even born. This man's been working at Apple for a long time. They're not cutting him off cold turkey. They're simply letting other people kind of take responsibilities on the day-to-day that he used to assume, but at his new company Love From, he will still be working directly with Apple as his first client, which means that a lot of design and a lot of Apple's momentum and tradition with how their software looks and how their hardware behaves will probably not drastically change too much from the original Jony Ive vision. No, he will not be pulling into Apple's parking lot, but that also doesn't mean that there's some new guy stepping into Jony Ive's position who's suddenly going to make everything you ever wanted in iOS come true. I feel like that's a lot of people's first impulse, because as we talked about in the past, the reason I said you're not going to see a giant iOS redesign like you did with iOS 7 is because iOS 7 was a massive change because there was a massive change in software development heads, and there wouldn't be a massive change in iOS looks and feel until you got a massive change in the software development head department. But a couple things to keep in mind. This doesn't exactly go into effect until 2020. It's not like Jony Ive is packing up his briefcase and leaving tomorrow. He's still going to be working directly with Apple at Apple as an employee for another 6 months before he officially starts Love From, and Apple will be his first client, meaning he's still going to be working and helping Apple design lots of different things, but now he'll be able to contract and work with different developers if he so wants to. Jony Ive gets to run his own company and decide what he wants to do, and for that, I'm happy for him. I encourage anyone to work for a company for nearly 30 years and tell me that you still want to keep working there, or do you want to mix things up a little bit and try something different? He's been working for Apple and been in charge of so many of their most iconic designs. It's natural for human beings to want change, to want to try something else and try to broaden their horizon, and perhaps he felt just kind of trapped that he was only working for Apple at this point, and he had lots of different ideas and likely wanted to go explore them outside of Apple. But, of course, still being willing to help Apple and still being very supportive of Apple's direction. As the statement officially says, he will continue to work closely on a range of products with Apple. What that officially and specifically refers to, we'll never know, but all I'm trying to say is you're not going to notice the change in design head for many, many years to come, because a lot of the hardware and software development teams already have lots of projects and deadlines. I feel like this is the big problem with people putting all of Apple's success in just a few famous names they know of. Steve Jobs was, of course, the biggest one, so that when Steve Jobs passed away, everyone assumed, oh, Apple's dead now. Oh, Apple will never be able to achieve what they've achieved in the past because their founder is dead, and now the company's doomed. It's obviously going to fail, even though I've been trying to tell people for a long time that Steve Jobs, while he was integral to Apple's beginning, near the time of his death, there were so many other factors at play. There's so many other people working at the company that simply losing one figure, even if it is a well-known figure, doesn't necessarily derail the entire company. A lot of people are actually saying they're glad Jony Ive is leaving because this will give us new perspective on hardware, and maybe, just maybe, we can get some hardware that's not so focused on being thin and light and trying to get those butterfly keys as thin as possible, you know, even if they are quite troublesome. And now we can get some more people in charge that are more focused on functionality and not so much aesthetics. I don't necessarily agree with all those those people. I think Jony Ive made a lot of great decisions for the company. It would be very, very difficult to disagree with that. But yes, the man was flawed, and also there were plenty of designs in the past decade that lots of people can say, yeah, that could have been built differently. May we remember that the trash can Mac Pro was also under the Jony Ive design team. So just like any figure who used to work at Apple or still does currently work at Apple, they are filled with good ideas that we're going to appreciate. And of course, they make mistakes, just like all of us, because these people are human. Can you please stop acting like the important, famous people at Apple are somehow Greek gods, and if one of them leaves, somehow the whole kingdom comes falling down? There's a lot more people working at Apple than just Jony Ive. He's a well-known figure, but that does not necessarily mean that if he leaves, suddenly everything's going to look ugly, or I can already tell there's going to be some morons out there that are going to look at the iPhone 11 camera design, you know, with the triple camera on the back, and they're going to be like, ew, that's so ugly. This is what happens when you fire Jony Ive and he leaves the company, even though he's not even leaving the company till next year. So he has everything to do with that design, but everyone's probably going to blame that design on the fact that Jony Ive has left already, even though that's completely inaccurate. And the next 3 years of Apple hardware and software announcements probably has a lot of plans in stone. Teams have long-term contracts and long-term plans for where they're going with software and hardware that you're not going to be able to notice the change in direction for many, many years because, for one, Jony Ive is still going to be working closely with Apple on exclusive projects that Apple will not work with anyone else with except Jony Ive. And for two, a lot of the stones are already put in place for these next generation projects, whether it be iOS 14 or the next generation MacBook. All of these things are already falling into place. You're not going to notice what Jony Ive wouldn't have approved of for another couple of years. So stop freaking out. Everyone can just relax. Apple's not doomed. And please, I encourage you, please read the statement directly from Apple Newsroom. That's like the truest form of publishing you can get. There's so many headlines and articles right now that are literally posted to dissuade you, that are literally made to confuse people and to make people think, oh, he's leaving today? Oh, he was fired? Like, it's going to confuse so many people out there if you don't actually just read the statement that Apple made themselves. If you read it yourselves, you'll understand that this is not a cold turkey firing or a cold turkey quitting of any kind. He's still going to be working with them very, very closely for the rest of the year and likely for many years to come. What I'm most interested in is what other companies is Jony Ive's business Love From going to work with? Obviously, we know they're working with Apple, of course, but what if like Google contracted Jony Ive to help design the next Pixel or something like that? Or maybe Samsung reached out to him. I don't know. There's probably a huge number of companies that would love to contract Jony Ive himself to help themselves get more iconic and recognizable designs. Tesla, you could talk to Jony. I don't know. I'm just spitballing. Either way, I think we should consider this good news. It may be a little bit sad that the title of Jony Ive working for Apple is being removed and now he's going to be working on his own, but still working with Apple. That's a little bit sad, but if anything, we should just be more excited that Jony Ive can be designing and creating more projects with companies outside of Apple. And I think that's great because I love what Jony Ive's done in regards to aesthetic design and even the software design, which please don't assume is instantly going to change with iOS 14. Again, he's going to be at the company for probably the bulk of development for iOS 14. Like the last 6 months of iOS 14 development, he won't be there. But other than that, they're working on iOS 14 right now, people. And please don't already assume that, oh, Jony Ive's gone, we can instantly change everything. That's likely not how Apple works as a company. They usually don't change things just for the sake of changing them. So please keep your hopes down in regards to, oh, iOS 14 is going to be a massive redesign. Confirmed. We know this for sure now. You don't. There's so much we don't know right now. All I'm saying is I wish Jony Ive the best. I appreciate all the time he's done at Apple, and I can't wait to see what he's going to produce from his new company, Love From. Interesting name, too. You can tell he thought about that for a while. What other companies do you think it would be interesting to see Jony Ive working with from here on out in regards to hardware design or software design? What do you think he should tackle next? Let me know by hitting me up over on Twitter or joining our Discord. This is your Apple Sheep here, and I will see you in the next one.